Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is defending his plans to seize Gaza City despite growing condemnation at home and abroad. His office says he spoke with U.S. President Donald Trump about a new offensive to take control of the remaining Hamas strongholds in Gaza and secure the release of hostages. Netanyahu says it's the best way to end the war with Hamas.
Given Hamas's refusal to lay down its arms, Israel has no choice but to finish the job and complete the defeat of Hamas.
That was the crux of Benjamin Netanyahu's message at a press conference for foreign media in Jerusalem. It was aimed at defending Israel's controversial plan to seize control of Gaza City and at silencing what Netanyahu called a global campaign of lies.
No nation can accept a genocidal terrorist organization, an organization committed to its annihilation, a stone's throw from its citizens. Our goal is not to occupy Gaza. Our goal is to free Gaza, free it from Hamas terrorists. The war can end tomorrow if Gaza, or rather if Hamas lays down its arms and releases all the remaining hostages.
He said the new military offensive will target 2 Hamas strongholds in Gaza and called the plan the best way to end the war and end it quickly. Netanyahu also said claims of starvation in Gaza were exaggerated and blamed the UN for not distributing aid and Hamas for looting what does get through. Netanyahu spoke ahead of a rare Sunday meeting of the UN Security Council in New York City. It was convened to discuss the Israeli Security Cabinet's approval of the new war plan for Gaza.
La France condamne.
France condemns in the strongest possible terms the plan of the Israeli government to expand its military operations to take control of Gaza City.
The emergency meeting was requested by France, Denmark, Greece, Slovenia, and the UK.
Expanding military operations will do nothing to bring an end to this conflict. It will not secure the release of the hostages. It will only deepen the suffering of Palestinian civilians in Gaza. This is not a path to resolution. It is a path to more bloodshed.
The Palestinian ambassador thanked council members for condemning Israel's military expansion plans and their support for the people of Gaza. But he added,
"You have to act. You have to do something about it. You have to stop it."
The acting U.S. envoy to the UN said Hamas was to blame for the current situation in Gaza. She told council members that's who they should be pressuring, not Israel.
Let's cross right over to DW correspondent Tania Krämer standing by for us in Jerusalem. Tania, you were at the presser with Netanyahu on Sunday. What was your impression of the Israeli prime minister under severe pressure right now?
Well, it was one of these rare occasions where the foreign press could also ask some questions. Now, he gave his statement and answered some questions. Certainly, perhaps because of this international pressure about the war plans by Israel, now he maintained that there are still 2 strongholds by Hamas. One is in Gaza City, and he showed a map from that, and also in the western area and the central area of Gaza, and that Israel needs to go in there, the military, to eliminate Hamas from that area. So, however, he left some door open, so to speak, for negotiations still to take place, and used it, what he has said all along during the war, that this is also part of this military pressure on Hamas to come to a deal and to release the remaining hostages. Now, he's at odds with this assessment with his own military leadership, who have said this, the taking over of Gaza or the occupation of Gaza City would actually harm the hostages, where some of them are believed to be held right now. He also said that he would not occupy Gaza, but rather, hand it over later to a civilian committee, but neither to Hamas, obviously, and neither to the Palestinian Authority. Now, this also is a strange twist of words, in a sense, because he also confirmed that the Israeli military, what they have also said, are already holding or having military control over 70 to 75% of the entire Gaza Strip. as well as the UN puts this number a bit higher. And he also claimed what many Palestinians would also not understand, that he is now actually liberating the Palestinian population from Hamas.
It's not only controversial, this plan among Israel's military leadership, it's also exposing divisions in Netanyahu's own cabinet, isn't it?
Well, still to see how large those divisions are. I think we have seen the finance minister Bezalel Smotrich threatening Netanyahu, or saying rather this doesn't go far enough. He has done that before. He basically, you have to see this also in the context of domestic politics here. He's talking to his own constituency, the far right. But it's still to see, he wants it to see to go all the way, really occupying Gaza and then allow Israeli settlers to come into Gaza. He has threatened many times to resign from the cabinet, and already we have a minority government there. But we have still to see that he would put this into action. And right now we are seeing also reports that some talks are ongoing, but of course we don't know where they stand and whether they will bridge the gap between Hamas and Israel.
For more, I'm now joined by Will Todman, a senior fellow in the Middle East program at the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington, D.C. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So, Netanyahu is defending his plan to take control of Gaza City, saying it's the only way to end the war. What do you make of those claims?
So in Netanyahu's view, there is no more use in trying for a partial solution to the hostage situation. He would say that previous attempts to come to short-term ceasefires have released small numbers of hostages, but it's not resulted in all of those hostages coming home. I think he also feels growing international pressure and domestic pressure as well, as you mentioned in your report. And I think he feels that now is one of his last chances to push ahead. He's losing the support of some of his key Western allies, the UK, France, and Germany in particular. And then he's also facing increasing pressure domestically as well. And so for him, I think he believes that this is he fears that Hamas might survive this conflict unless he takes more drastic measures. And I think that's what this plan is all about.
Now, you were just mentioning some of that domestic pressure, and we know that Israel's finance minister Smotrich released a statement calling this plan a half measure. So how strong are the divisions inside the cabinet of Netanyahu's government?
Yes. So on one side, there are those far-right politicians like Smotrich who are saying that this is not enough. They would like to see an annexation of large parts of Gaza, and they think that this plan to seize Gaza City and to sort of try to push Hamas out is not enough. So they want even more. At the same time, though, there are growing divisions between the Israeli army, the IDF, and the cabinet. Senior members of the IDF have expressed their concerns about conducting such a major operation in a densely populated area like Gaza City. It's estimated that about 1 million Palestinians are currently living there. They're also concerned about growing fatigue among their own ranks. And so I think on their side, they're saying they would like to see more caution. They would like to see, that the army doesn't rush in to implement such a major operation. So I think Netanyahu is feeling pressure from both sides in his cabinet. And then at the same time, I think there's growing pressure among the Israeli people as well, with large protests breaking out in opposition to these plans.
Now, you mentioned fatigue among the rank and file of the IDF, and we've been reading that the Israeli army will likely require tens of thousands of reservists to be called up for the new Gaza plan, and it's reported that as many as 40% of those reservists are already refusing service. So how likely is it, do you think, that more will respond to the call?
So we don't know exactly how many reservists will be needed because at this stage, the IDF are still drawing up their plans to implement this directive from the Israeli cabinet. So I think within a week or so, we will get clearer numbers about exactly how many reservists will be needed. But many of these people have already spent long times in Gaza in extremely difficult circumstances. Many of them are traumatized and are coming back with PTSD and other kind of mental health challenges. We've also seen about 24 IDF soldiers have died by suicide as well, according to Israeli media. So there are real concerns. I think that the Israeli army is not able to conduct such a major operation at this stage. But I think in response to that, Prime Minister Netanyahu says that at previous stages, since the attacks of October the 7th, the army have tried to warn him that the soldiers are not ready, are not fully up to the task. He has ignored those concerns and ultimately has achieved great victories in Lebanon, for example, and also with the strikes on Iran just a couple of months ago. So I think Netanyahu is steadfast in this, and he thinks that he can push ahead and that it's up to the IDF to secure the participation of those reservists that will be necessary for those operations.
Now, if we could for a moment turn our attention to the public at large in Israel. Some hostage families are calling for a general strike in the country. So is public support strong enough for Netanyahu to move forward with the plan?
I think the Israeli public are quite divided. They ultimately are extremely united in the need to get the hostages back. There are posters of the hostages all over Israel, and this is something that is extremely, front of mind for most Israelis, I think. But where they differ is on the tactics of how to achieve their release. And as you mentioned, the hostage families are extremely concerned that this attack will result in, or this offensive will result in the deaths of those hostages. They're calling for a general strike. I think at the moment it's unlikely that there will be a general strike because the labor union has not yet signed on to this. There are various political and legal reasons for that. They may not be able to, according to a court decision in Tel Aviv last year, because the aim of the strike is not about workers' rights. But regardless, I think we are seeing growing numbers of Israelis taking to the streets to express their opposition to this plan. But, for another segment of Israelis, I think they are so exhausted by the ongoing captivity of these hostages, and they just want to see them home. And I think some do support this strategy.
All right. That was Will Todman from the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Thank you very much for your analysis.
Thanks for having me.
Let's bring in Hans-Jakob Schindler. He's the Senior Director of the Counter-Extremism Project in Berlin. Welcome back to DW, Hans. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu says his plan is the best way to end the war with Hamas. What's your take?
Well, it's one way to end the war. Another way would have been, of course, to hand over the security control inside the Gaza Strip to some kind of international force. But between the interview on Fox News before the Security Cabinet meeting, where he spoke of Arab forces, now the point of the 5 aims of the war that he outlined in his press conference on Sunday was a non-Israeli civil administration, which seems to be something very different. So that shows that still there is no political consensus of what the long-term security arrangements in Gaza will be, which is the only way to actually make sure that Hamas doesn't come back. So we remain with the option that the IDF has to do it itself, which is a very, very costly option for Israel, but also very dangerous for Palestinians as well as the hostages.
There is another way out, though, which would be a negotiated solution. For Netanyahu, Hamas disarmament is a key condition for that. Hamas, on the other hand, say they would only lay down their weapons after the creation of a sovereign Palestinian state. Why is that not an option for the Israeli government?
Look, I mean, this sentence that they're only going to lay down the weapons after the creation of a Palestinian state is, of course, meant to indicate that they're not ready for a negotiated solution. A Palestinian statehood, the negotiations would take a very, very long time and would, of course, not just involve the situation in Gaza, but also the situation in West Bank. So what, in essence, Hamas is saying, we are not going to lay down our weapons now or any time in the future.
But would the Netanyahu government be in a position to negotiate a two-state solution? It seems like there are several opponents in his cabinet.
Not only in his cabinet. If you talk to Israeli politicians, it goes far into the center of politics, not just the conservative and right-wing extremists, but also in the center of Israeli politics. The idea of a two-state solution following October 7th, the pogrom-like terror attack, as well as the hostages taking by Hamas, it seems a very far-fetched option politically. So what is feasible right now is to make sure that Gaza gets, the fighting in Gaza stops, Hamas is disarmed. But for that, Israel clearly would need an international force to come in. Because if the IDF is supposed to do this long-term, and Netanyahu insists it's not going to be long-term, then it would be extremely costly for all sides.
Mm-hmm. Let's look at the timeline here, not only because it's a difficult task that they have set out to accomplish, but also because there might be a morale problem looming, because an overwhelming majority of Israelis don't believe in a military solution to this conflict. So how do you see this panning out?
Well, it's not only a morale problem because there is some lack of trust in the government, but it's also now nearly 3 years that an increased number of reservists have to fight on several fronts. In Lebanon, against the Houthis, against Iran, in Gaza, increased security measures in the West Bank. So it is a drain not only on those individuals who actually supposed to work in the Israeli economy, because the actual standing Israeli army is rather small. The bulk of the forces deployed right now are reservists. And so there is a psychological strain, there's an economic strain, and there's also a question of when is this ever going to end? Because there is no clearly formulated, realistic exit strategy that the prime minister has presented to the world, but also to his own society.
Mm-hmm. Israel's plan to expand its military offensive has drawn not only international criticism, even the head of the army has said that the IDF might be walking into a death trap here. But the U.S., Israel's staunchest supporter and, of course, biggest military supplier, stands by Netanyahu. Does that mean they believe he is choosing the right approach here?
Well, I mean, from an Israeli government perspective, it seems that this is the only option that the Israeli cabinet in its totality, with including the more extreme parts of the government, were able to agree on. Of course, as I said, there would have been other options that the IDF doesn't have to take control of the full Gaza Strip. It is clear, unless someone takes control of all of the Gaza Strip, Hamas will always be able to withdraw into the areas that are not under control of the IDF or anyone else. And therefore, the armament of Hamas, if they're not willing to give up their weapons, is not going to be possible.
Could I briefly, before I let you go, get you to tell me what your advice to Benjamin Netanyahu at this stage would be?
I'm not in a position to advise the Israeli prime minister. He has a particularly difficult political situation within his own cabinet, but also within Israeli society. Ending this conflict sooner rather than later is definitely the best thing that he can do politically, but also economically for Israel, as well as for Palestinian civilians. Now, the decision the Security Cabinet has done is a very risky one. It risks the hostages, it risks Palestinian civilians, who Hamas will continue to use as human shields against Israeli attacks. But if this is the only option to really take control of all of the Gaza Strip and thereby ensure that Hamas is not going to be able to regroup, then that's the only option that he possibly can take politically.
That is Hans-Jakob Schindler of the Counter-Extremism Project. Always a pleasure.
Thank you.